When Richard Hayes turned 51, he believed he had already seen it all: romance, heartbreak, marriages, and even the slow burn of loneliness that creeps in during the quieter seasons of life. Divorced and living in Austin, Texas, Richard filled his days consulting for a tech firm and his evenings reading Hemingway or sipping black coffee at the neighborhood cafe. He had become a man who appreciated peace over parties and conversation over chaos. But life, in its unpredictable nature, still had more to teach him, especially about the subtle, sometimes silent language of attraction. It all started on a Monday morning at the Java Junction, a locally owned coffee shop Richard visited religiously. As he stepped inside, he noticed someone new behind the counter. She was younger, perhaps late 20s, with a warm smile and confident posture. Her name tag read Megan. She was charismatic without trying to be, balancing orders and banter with casual grace. When Richard stepped up to order his regular black coffee, she looked up with a spark in her eyes. "Let me guess, no cream, no sugar, extra strong?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Richard chuckled. "That obvious?" "No, just a good read," she said with a playful shrug. He paid, thanked her, and went to his usual corner. But something about her lingered in his thoughts. It wasn't just her youth or appearance. It was her demeanor, the ease with which she'd spoken to him. Still, Richard brushed it off. She was just friendly, polite. That was all. But then it happened again. And again. Over the next few weeks, Richard noticed little things. Megan began to remember his order perfectly, and would often greet him by name before he even reached the counter. Their conversations stretched from quick hellos to short chats about books, music, and local festivals. One morning, she touched his hand ever so briefly while handing him his cup. It wasn't a flirtatious grab, more like a casual graze, barely there. But it sent a signal Richard couldn't ignore. He began to wonder, was she just being nice, or was there something more happening beneath the surface? Richard's curiosity only deepened when he visited the cafe on a Saturday. Megan wasn't working the counter that day. Instead, she was seated alone at a side table, reading a novel and sipping something iced. When she saw him, she waved him over. "You're not a Saturday kind of guy," she teased as he approached. "And you're not usually out front reading," he replied. They chatted, and again there it was. The subtlety. Her posture was relaxed, but she leaned in when he spoke, her eyes locked onto his. When he laughed, she reached out and gently touched his forearm. It wasn't overt. It wasn't sexual. But it felt intentional, delicate, like she was saying something without using words. Over the next month, Richard began noticing a pattern, not just with Megan but with others. A waitress at the local bistro who lingered a little longer at his table. A receptionist at a health seminar who giggled at his jokes a little too hard. And it dawned on him, maybe younger women had their own way of expressing attraction to older men. Subtle, physical cues masked as casual interactions. Not obvious, not aggressive, but real. One afternoon, Richard brought this up with his longtime friend, Daniel Carter, a semi-retired therapist who often gave him insight into human behavior. "Maybe I'm overthinking," Richard said. "But lately I feel like I'm picking up these signals from younger women. But they're not direct. They're soft, like whispers instead of shouts." Daniel smiled knowingly. "You're not imagining it. Flirtation doesn't always come in neon lights, especially when it's a younger woman showing interest in an older man." He leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "See, some younger women are drawn to older men for various reasons: emotional maturity, confidence, depth. But they often don't want to appear obvious or aggressive, especially if there's an age difference. So they flirt in more physical, nuanced ways. It's body language, proximity. They show interest without calling it out loud." That conversation stuck with Richard. He started viewing his interactions differently. Not with inflated pride, but with clearer understanding. He began recognizing the gentle signals that had been hiding in plain sight. There was Claire, a 30-year-old art teacher who attended a community painting class he recently joined. During a break, She shared a stool next to him even though several others were empty. She complimented his use of color, then tilted her head as she spoke, her knee brushing his. When they parted ways, she lightly touched his shoulder, a move that once might have seemed casual but now read differently. There was no push, no pressure, just a quiet invitation. Or Lindsay, the yoga instructor at his wellness center. After class, she often lingered to chat, her eyes lighting up when Richard spoke about his travels. She once adjusted his posture in class, her hands steady and sure, her touch warm but respectful. And once, after he joked about being the stiffest in class, she playfully nudged him with her elbow and said, "I like the way you show up." Another time, at a charity fundraiser, Richard was introduced to Monica, a journalist in her late 20s. She asked him about his career, and when he mentioned how much he enjoyed mentoring younger professionals, her smile widened. "That's attractive," she said. "Most people your age just want to check out." He raised an eyebrow. "My age?" He smirked. "You know what I mean, in a good way." Throughout the night, her posture mirrored his. She tucked her hair behind her ear when he did. She laughed softly, adjusted her seat closer each time the conversation deepened, and once brushed something imaginary off his jacket. She wasn't doing it to be overtly flirtatious. She was simply present, in a way younger women often are when they're drawn in but cautious. And all of this taught Richard something profound. Younger women who are emotionally connected to an older man may not shout it out with grand gestures or bold declarations. Instead, they express it with their bodies, their eyes, the proximity they keep. It's the angle of their shoulders, the way their gaze lingers, the deliberate yet accidental touches. Their flirtation is less about seduction and more about connection, a safe, almost secret way of showing they feel something. For Richard, it was never about chasing youth. It was about being seen. And in these soft gestures, he felt noticed, not as someone's father figure or wise old friend, but as a man. Eventually, things with Megan took a subtle shift. One evening, after closing hours, he found himself helping her carry out supplies from the cafe. The sidewalk was empty, the streetlights warm against the fading sky. As she closed the trunk of her car, she looked at him and said, "You know, I really enjoy our talks." "So do I," Richard replied. She stepped closer. "I hope it's not weird, but I think you're very calming. Like being around you makes me feel safe." Richard smiled, choosing his words carefully. "That's one of the kindest things someone said to me." They stood in silence for a moment. Then she reached out and gently squeezed his hand. Not as a lover, not as a barista, but as a woman making her interest quietly known. In that moment, Richard realized that life still held surprises. That attraction could be expressed in whispers. That younger women, when emotionally connected, flirt not with theatrics but with grace. And if you listen, CLO,